let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We haven't
This
shipped
is
it
so
yet. We
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
As the
developers
Kubernetes
do?
ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Administrator Office Hours live stream. I am Andrew Sullivan, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Johnny Rickard. How are you today, sir?
My man, I'm good to go. How are you?
I can't complain too much. I will say I'm slightly discombobulated. I swapped out desks. We had a long weekend last week or the week before. I don't remember which. So I think I said last week that I swapped out desks. Well, you see my microphone arm here it's in my way, and
Yeah.
today I got to type anyways. So I was sitting here adjusting things and trying to get it out of my way right before we were starting, and I feel discombobulated. But
You should use it as like a boxing thing, just kind of like duck and move.
yeah, it's funny because I was talking to my son about it the other day, and he was like, "Why don't you just get a different microphone and like a condenser microphone?" I'm like, "Do you know how noisy this house is? Like dogs and children and like typing and fans and air conditioning. Like condensers
Everything.
are the condensers are fine in a quiet room. This is not a quiet room. Like I can hear
Yeah.
right now the people across the street are getting their lawn mowed, which is very loud. And anyways, so I thought about maybe doing like a shotgun microphone or something, putting it right up here up next to the camera.
Mm.
But anyways,
Might not be a bad idea.
enough of me whining, right? For first world
First world
problems, right?
problems.
Yeah. So today's topic is something that is exciting to Johnny and I. We've got this absolutely massive list of things to talk about, to chat about. For folks who watched I think it was a 90-minute What's New in 4.11 session, it covered kind of 9,000 things in a very short period of time, and it covers things that span a broad range of stuff. So we tried to go through and distill that list and get it down to just things that we think that you all, our audience of administrators, are going to care about. So hopefully we hit the mark on most of these things. If there are things that you are interested in but you don't hear today, fear not, because we're always willing to talk about new things. So don't hesitate to let us know if you want to hear about something. But we also have, I think it's like 4 or 5 more streams around various 4.11 things, Johnny. Like
yeah, it's good. We've got a bunch of good things coming up. So
yeah, I was going to talk about it in top of mind, but I'll talk about it now, which is let's see here, future 4.11 streams. So next week we're doing a VMware special. So I will be at VMware Explore, which is the new name for VMworld. So we're going to focus on all things VMware. There's a number of changes that happened with VMware in 4.11. We'll talk about those. We'll talk about VMware at a big picture level. Hopefully I can find and drag a VMware person in with me, but no guarantees. So next week will be VMware. I think a week or two after that, we'll be talking about composable OpenShift. We'll be talking about the alternative recommender for the vertical pod autoscaler, along with custom metric autoscaling, the tech preview Kita. We've got a stream planned around logging 5.5, so talking about changes to Loki, vector, right, all of that other stuff. That's just what we've got like concrete planned. We've got a bunch of other stuff coming up as well. Software security, software supply chain security. One that I'm personally excited for, which is optimizing resource utilization using the descheduler, pod eviction, and the secondary schedulers. So yeah, all of that to say, that's like what, eight episodes, the next 2 months worth of content. So please subscribe, do the thing on the platform wherever you're at, so that way when we come online. You can also go to red.ht/livestream, and you'll see the live streaming calendar and all that other stuff there. You can add it to your own calendar if you'd like, so that you can get notifications and stuff. So yeah, lots of stuff coming up. So much content that it's really exciting to be in the OpenShift world right now, right?
Yeah, for sure.
For 4.11, it's funny because with every release, I talk with product marketing, and product marketing says, oh, this isn't a big release. There's not a lot going on. There's just these little things, and they think about it completely differently because they think
Hmm.
from the terms of like marketing campaigns and like, oh, can we go out and talk about this, big picture, what do they call them, like stories or market problems. How are we addressing the edge space? And they look at it and say, oh, like ZTP, big deal. I'm like, well, yes, but that enables easy deployment and provisioning of clusters at the edge when used in conjunction with ACM. Like, it adds up to this bigger thing. And I feel like, anyways, where I'm going with all of this is we've been stuck in that rut, if you will, for the last like
Hmm.
3 or 4 versions where product marketing is just like, meh, it's a small release. And meanwhile, I'm like, no, there's so much going on. And 4.11 is like the start of a lot of really big things happening with OpenShift. I think 4.12 and 4.13, we're going to see a lot more. You're seeing it in tech previews now. So things like Kita is a big deal, right?
Hmm.
Adds it's really powerful functionality. KCP, hosted control planes, you know, uh, uh, what we're currently calling microshift, but I think they're trying to come up with a new name for it. There's just so much going on. So yeah. Yeah, logging 5.5 isn't just for OCP 4.11. You're right, RHope 9, although it is, they align their releases with OpenShift releases for whatever reasons, um, along with several other things. What else was released recently? Logging
Ooh,
5.
I think. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think ODF is released, right, or coming out with the 4.11
Yeah.
release. It should be this week if it hasn't dropped already.
Yeah. OpenShift Virtualization 4.11 is also in the near future. We were talking with them. Did I include you on that conversation? I think I did. Anyways, I was talking with them about having them come on and have a session with us about what's happening in OpenShift virtualization with their new release as well. So, never ending, for pun intended, stream of topics, right?
All good things. All good
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
So I guess no reason not to keep rolling with some top of mind topics while we're at it. Just to formalize our introduction to top of mind. So these are things that Johnny and I have identified that are, we think, important or maybe interesting to you all that aren't necessarily related to today's topic. So by all means, ask us questions, right? Add in things as you see fit. We're happy to have a chat about any of these. They're just not directly related to today's what's new for administrators. Let's see. We already talked about decoupled features, updates to 4.11. So remember, when a release goes GA, it is GA for new installs, but it takes some time for it to be updated or added to the update channels. I say that so added to the stable upgrade channel. So when it goes GA, you can use fast in order to upgrade, in this case, your 4.10 clusters to 4.11. Remember, that is a fully supported update as well. So if you want to use fast, you want to get to 4.11 right now, something goes wrong, pick up the phone, call us, and they'll help you out with that. However, and why I started saying this is because there's currently the new phrase that they told me to use. It is not recommended but supported due to, or they pulled the default upgrade edge, so that if you just go in, where's my window here? I can just show this. I just have to log in. Let's see, share screen, window, this guy, share. So if I go to console dash, guy, oh, nope, console dash, there we go. Got to get the right link. Come on. If I log into type today.
Oh, that's every day for me.
Yeah, that's fair. It's most days for me too. I shouldn't say just today. So this is a 41025 cluster. So if I come down here to update, and let's switch to the fast 4.11 channel and select a version, you'll notice that there are no 4.11 available inside of here. So if I toggle this thing, suddenly 4.11.0 and .1 become available. They are supported but not recommended. So I can force the update. I say force. You can do this from the CLI as well. But essentially, the issue here, and I think we talked about this last week, is a bug or an issue in OVN Kubernetes. So if you're not using OVN Kubernetes, absolutely, you can make that choice, accept the risk and say, please roll ahead with 4.11. If you are using OVN Kubernetes, and now I lost my window with my link, here we go. There is an issue that was found with quote unquote highly loaded clusters. So you can see here nodes with substantial numbers of containers, for example, 200 plus, and contention for CPU time are likely to have the RPM OSD tree service fail to start. So from what I understand, there's no danger to workload here. Effectively, you just have to go in and reboot the node. But it can cause, or this was enough for them to say we want to pull it from the recommended updates and put it into supported but not recommended. I hope that was clear. I feel like I was really long-winded there.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah. Random question. If nm state operator is installed but no instances, will this still affect OVN Kubernetes? I don't believe so. As far as I know, so nm state, if you're not, even if you are configuring things, so long as you are not configuring or adjusting the interface that is the quote unquote primary interface for OVN Kubernetes, it should be fine. So what do I mean by that? So let's say I deploy my cluster and each one of my nodes has, 4 NICs, ETH0, 1, 2, 3. And ETH0 is the one that has an IP address on the machine network.cider and install config.yaml. So it's on, that basically that's the NIC that it identifies as being the primary and where it will set up the SDN. If you look at the host, that's also the one that has the OVS bridge or OVN bridge and all that other stuff on it. So long as you're not adjusting that network interface, so day 2, you go in and say, oh, I really wanted to bond ETH0 and ETH1, right? And then that would cause issues. If you say, oh, I really wanted to bond, ETH2 and ETH3, that's not going to affect anything. You'll be perfectly fine to do that. So if you're not configuring anything with nm state, if it's just there, you don't have anything to worry about there either. So yeah, I hope that helps. In markets around the world, every time you upgrade a product, you need to recertify it. Another interesting thing there, our Hope 9. So for certified operators, we don't require, but we strongly encourage our partners to recertify with each one of the EOS releases. So just keep an eye on, and the partners, they have to go in and update their operator to add support for each new version anyways. So just keep an eye on, if you have a bunch of layered operators on top, they should prevent you from shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak, with regard to that. Let's see, moving on here. And I just remembered that I have a hard stop at 12:20 Eastern today. I have to take my oldest to driver's ed, which, despite all the gray, despite all the gray, I don't feel that old until I realize that he is that old, and now then I do feel old.
That's awesome.
Let's see. So we talked a little bit before about. I'll open up a new tab for this. So we talked before about the pod security admission or pod security policies changing with OpenShift 4.11, where the old restricted PSP or SCC is no longer being used by default for new OpenShift 4.11 deploys. It now uses restricted v2, which basically drops everything as opposed to only dropping a subset. So if you look through this blog post, it's a really thorough, really in-depth blog post that walks through all of these changes. And this one is written in the context of, you all customers, users, right, administrators, as opposed to the other one that we first linked, because that one was more targeted at partners. Just so happened the partner team was faster to get their blog post out. So the content here, or the end result here, should be basically identical. They just go into some additional information and some additional ways that we as administrators, as users of OpenShift, can basically discover more information, set defaults, all that other stuff, as opposed to the partner blog, which is more oriented at folks who are developing operators, and where we say, hey, take this into account and make sure your operator is doing the right thing, type of stuff. So that's a good one. And I think this afternoon we have for any Red Hatters who are watching us live, this afternoon there is an internal enablement session on this being hosted by the Containers Community of Practice. I think
And the
you're
person that wrote this blog is going to be there. So.
Yeah. I think you're I'm there. I think mostly just to probably learn. I think you're emceeing it or something, aren't you, Jamie?
Yep. I got I'm tribute for the MC. So yes.
Yeah. Tribute. That's funny. Let's see. I think I only got one more. Which was this was an interesting one. So I don't know why. Or I guess there's two things here. So one, back in the 4.8 or 4.9 days, we changed the CDN that's used for distributing OpenShift images. So hopefully by now we've all caught up on this. So if you had, for example, specific firewall exceptions, hey, I need to allow any external access. There was a KCS that had all of the URLs, all of the domains that you needed to whitelist the OpenShift cluster to access. So that got updated, 3 or 4 versions ago. But for whatever reason, with OpenShift 4.11, when we went to mirror.openshift.com and looked at, in particular, the CoreOS dependencies inside of here, this wasn't populated for a while. I don't know why. I haven't dug into it other than I saw that there was like 3 or 4 different BZs or Jira issues now because they merged Jira and Bugzilla about it, and then it was suddenly taken care of. But I did learn from one of the threads that basically, as a workaround, you can download directly from the CDN. So if we look at, so if we do OpenShift install CoreOS, I did not know that this was a command. If you do an OpenShift install, it shows up. I just never paid attention to it. Right? So if we do that OpenShift install, so let me clear the screen here so it's a little easier to read. So OpenShift install CoreOS print stream JSON. I'm going to do a pipe to JQ here, hopefully to make it a little easier to read. This basically outputs all of the places that the installer will go to get OpenShift or CoreOS images. So, for example, when I do a vSphere IPI deployment, right, it's going to reach out to the CDN and it's going to download that OVA and it will store it onto my local system, and then it will push that OVA into my vCenter environment. So how does it know where to go to get that information? Well, if I look through this JSON, you can see here is the x86 platform. If I go all the way up to the top, you'd be able to see the format of this. But here's x86, and then I can kind of scroll through and say, okay, here's Allianz, here's AWS, Azure, Azure Stack, GCP, IBM Cloud, Metal, and all the different components of Metal. Like here's the ISO, if you wanted to download the ISO. And you can just use this URL to directly do like a curl or a wget or something to pull that in. So Nutanix, OpenStack, QEMU, VMware. So here, if I wanted to grab the OVA directly from the SDN, that's where I can get it from.
That is awesome.
I thought that was really cool. It was something that I hadn't realized before, and makes it, easier to get bits if you need to, and especially because you can now, or that makes it easy to script. I guess you could always, where'd my thing go? Over here. I guess you could always, dependencies, CoreOS 4.11 latest, and then these are named, you see both with the version number 4.11 at 0, as well as down here without a version number. So you could always script against that. But if you wanted to have specific for your installer version, because you never know, maybe with 4.11.12 we'll have another CoreOS image, come out. You can always just another way.
That's awesome. Yes, you just reminded me of something. So like you were talking about, like you've always seen it, but you haven't really paid attention to it. So like when I would be learning something new, right? What I'd do is I'd run the CLI, so like OC, and then do dash dash help, and I would kind of like walk through each one of those things to kind of see the different options. So like, oh, okay, if I want to do this, I here's kind of that workflow. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten lazier, so I don't do that nearly as much. But like, it's a good idea too. If you're trying to learn something, like take that CLI and just run it, and then do dash dash help, or just kind of like tab it out and see what pops up, and then kind of walk it, so that way you can kind of get an idea of like what you can and can't configure from the CLI. So just little memory lane there.
Yeah, I always encourage folks to do the explain. You've heard, how many times have you heard me say,
Mm-hmm.
use OC explain or OpenShift install explain to dig through all the options and all the features that are inside of there. So that's just another version of that, of use dash dash help and explore each one of those commands.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Although it does kind of remind me, like, years and years and years ago when I was a Linux admin and they would ask me to do technical interviews for folks, I would usually find like the most esoteric, crazy, like, what is this option on this, command that nobody since the 1980s has used? And it was more, it wasn't a stump the chump type of thing, right? Or I expect people to know every aspect of every command of every, Linux flavor that there is. It's rather, do you know where to go to get help? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the answer I was really looking for is, well, I don't know, but I would start by going and looking at the man page for, whatever, and dig from there and see what I can find in the documentation, or maybe I do a Google search for this. And yeah.
Yeah. Mine's more of a bully, but it's because people did it to me. Is name 10 commands in Linux that are 3 letters. And so it's like, there's the easy ones where you're like, oh, okay, SSH. And then as you start getting like further out, you're like, oh, wait, hold on. I love that one. That one, or the 2-letter commands.
You got to do like space ls, right? So that way it doesn't show up in history, and then it's 3 letters.
That's just cheating.
Yeah.
Cheating's not
Hey,
allowed.
work smarter, not harder.
That's awesome.
All right. That's all I got for top of mind topics. I don't think, Johnny, did you have any or anything you wanted to bring up?
No, not this. I mean, you touched on it with the pod security policy stuff, right? I mean, that's such a big deal, and that's going to be that's going to have a big impact. So just pay attention to that, and pay attention to the info that's coming out about it.
Dave, yes, there's always an XKCD. Always. 1168. I'll have to look it up.
There we go.
Open up a new tab here. That way I don't forget to check. All right. So let's talk about OpenShift 4.11 and what's new for administrators. So just real quickly, this is a reminder that this is office hours. So office hours means that we are here for you, for our audience, to ask, or to answer rather, any questions that you may have. So it doesn't matter if it's related to 4.11 or anything like that. If you've got questions about OpenShift, ask us. We'll do our best to answer here on the stream. If we don't know the answer, which does happen rather frequently, we'll do our best to find those answers while we're on the stream by reaching back to folks or searching, doing that type of stuff. If we can't get that answer while we're here on the stream, we'll follow up in next week's stream or whenever the next stream happens to be. You can also reach out to us anytime on social media. So if you're not watching us live, if we don't satisfactorily answer your question here, we try our best not to miss any questions. If we happen to miss a question here in chat or something like that, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach me at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. I love email. Email is great. It's the best, least distracting method of anything ever. He says sarcastically, but no, don't hesitate to send us email, or Twitter, at Practical Andrew, as well as on Reddit and all the other places. Thank you, Stephanie, our producer here in the background, for popping up my information there. And Johnny is at JRockTX on social media, or at Johnny, not at Johnny, but Johnny, JONNY, at redhat.com. Are there plans for OpenShift to improve the KVM install for testing? I don't think so. So I'm assuming they're sleepy dudes that you're probably thinking of like a KVM IPI type of install thing. So the problem with that is KVM, when we think of, or specifically think of like libvirt KVM, it's limited to a single physical node. And for better or worse, Andrew's interpretation, so Andrew's opinion, which means that I cannot be held responsible for what comes out of my mouth, um, is that we discourage that because it's not a good deployment, right? So if I deploy a 5 node, virtual KVM virtualized OpenShift cluster onto a single physical server, it's still a single point of failure. So rather, we would encourage you to use something like Red Hat virtualization or OpenShift virtualization or OpenStack or something like that to do the KVM based piece. Kumar, is it stable enough to upgrade 4.11.1 from 4.10.26? So I'll say I have not had any issues upgrading. So I've upgraded 4 clusters now. I did have one compact cluster where one of my control plane nodes was throwing a random error, and I literally just rebooted it, and it fixed itself and went back to normal. So stable is relative. You have to decide whether or not you want to, accept any real or perceived risk associated with doing those updates. Red Hat's our official determination of quote unquote stable is when it reaches the stable upgrade channel. But just remember that fast is fully supported if you choose to do that before it reaches stable. RHOP 9, OVN Kubernetes. OVN Kubernetes is slowly becoming the default SDN. We had talked about it, gosh, it's been like 40 or 50 episodes since we had Mark Curry on. And it was back in like the 4.6 or 4.7 days. And at that time, the thought was, well, in 4.9 or something like that, 4.8 or 4.9, OVN would become, for every platform, the default. OVN Kubernetes would become the default SDN. For various reasons, that got pushed out. Hasn't happened yet. We should probably follow up with Mark, have him back on the stream because it's been a while. And I recently learned that, Mark lives here in the Raleigh area. I actually saw him in the tower and we chatted. I'm like, I thought you lived in Boston or something, but no. And 2, while we were chatting, I also learned a bunch of stuff about Gateway API. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that's coming down the pipe. So hopefully we'll be able to have him back on in the not too distant future.
Nice. Yeah, I worked with him a little bit a long time ago with the VMware NSX operator. For I think it was 4.6 or 4.7 is when it dropped. Yeah, he's full of information.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Mark is a fountain of information, if you will. RHOP 9 is supposed to be default in 4.8. So yeah, that's gotten pushed out. I think it was made the default for it's some deployment types and places. I think single node OpenShift, it's the default. Maybe compact, I'm not sure. Maybe bare metal IPI. It's in places here and there. I don't have the list off the top of my head. Dave, I think 4.12 is the new target. Yeah, I honestly don't know.
Like that's what I heard too. I feel 4.12 is what I feel like what I heard.
So I know there's lots of cool stuff in OVN Kubernetes. My stance has always been stick with the default unless you don't need the default. And the good news is with OpenShift SDN, you can do an update or a change, modification, redeployment. I don't know. You can change to OpenShift or OVN Kubernetes after deployment. You can't go the other direction, but you can go OpenShift SDN to OVN Kubernetes day 2. Let's see. What else did I have? What have I got open here? So let's see. An outline of this week's topic. Deprecated to remove features. So 4.11, even though, we've been talking about it, we had the whole what's new session, all that other stuff. Most of the time, we don't do a good job of talking about what's been deprecated or removed. So one thing I always recommend to folks is always give the release notes a good, at least a once over for all the new features and enhancements. So all the stuff that's happening there. But always look at the deprecated and removed features. So for example, if we scroll down through here, I always look for ones where, so this middle column is OpenShift 4.10. So where it changes from, for example, deprecated to removed. So you'll notice that Grafana is no longer deployed as a part of OpenShift 4.11. Same thing with access to the Prometheus and Grafana UI, right? So deprecated in 4.10, fully removed in 4.11. So if I switch over to my 4.11 cluster here, oh yeah, a lot of people seem to think it's a big deal that there's a dark mode. I agree. I like dark mode. If you are curious, so I'm on a Mac. My system wide preference is dark mode, so it automatically picked up on that and used it. But if you go to your user up here and go to user preferences, you can change the theme. So this is how you can change it manually if you'd like.
I love this. The dark mode is so awesome. Like, I'm so happy they finally did this.
So yeah, I agree. I find it generally I'm in a slightly darkened room, so this helps with the whole screen glare issue and all that other stuff. Anyways, sorry, I'm losing focus. If we come down here to observe, you'll notice that if we go to dashboards, right, it's all the normal dashboards that are here. If we go to metrics, there's no longer the little link to open in Prometheus or anything like that. And if we come up here to networking and go to routes and select all projects, there is no routes for either Grafana or for Prometheus. So you can see the Prometheus federate endpoints. So this is these are the metrics endpoints that you can query to get data out, but it is not the, like, if you deploy Grafana or something like that, that's what you would point to Grafana at as a data source. But there's not the query interface that's available, that traditional UI. And Grafana is just not present at all. So we've been talking about this for a long time. It's finally happened, if you will. The logic here is that, from what I understand, I'll caveat it with that, there was some sort of problem, issue, trouble, hardship, I don't know, with translating OpenShift RBAC into Grafana RBAC. So Andrew, in my AN solo username up here, if I only have access to 2 namespaces, when I would open that Grafana dashboard, there was no way for it to limit me to just seeing the 2 namespaces that I'm allowed to see. Whereas with the built-in dashboards, and I happen to be a cluster administrator here, with the built-in dashboards, I can only see the namespaces that I have permissions to. So that was one of the big driving factors. And they did, so all of the dashboards that were in that Grafana instance are now natively available here in the console. And they have been for a while, right? So a lot of folks ask, well, what if I wanted to customize those? Well, that Grafana instance that shipped with the OpenShift, the core OpenShift cluster, has always been read-only. We never supported making any modifications to it. We've always said since day one, right, you have to deploy your own Grafana to create custom dashboards. So the exact same is true now. And we talked about that back in episode 63. Where's my notes? Yeah, 63. So in episode 63, we did a demo of exactly how to deploy Grafana using the operator, how to point it to the endpoint, both Thanos as well as Prometheus, and set up those dashboards and stuff. So RHOP 9 Grafana RBAC, isn't that a license module? Maybe.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea. I will admit that I have not dug deeply into Grafana. Usually I struggle through the Grafana query language or whatever query language in order to get my charts up and running, and that's as far as I've made it.
Same.
Is it? I don't know. Does anybody remember cacti? I used to do a lot with cacti back like 15 years ago.
That sounds familiar, but I can't think of like an instance of where I'd used it. Cacti.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm catching up on chat here.
Yeah, it's just, I think you've got it pretty much nailed down.
Yeah, RHOP 9. Yes, correct. If you want to use Windows nodes, you do have to set the hybrid overlay mode, which can only be done at install time. But if you have no intention of using Windows nodes, you can make that day 2 shift. I want to say I thought I heard that they were going to do away with that requirement as well. I dug around one time and found out that basically it's an instability issue why they couldn't do it day 2, adding on the hybrid thing. So I don't know. I need to find out some more information there.
And I almost missed a question. So it's I'm going to butcher the name. Akeldelis on 4.8. What is the network manager wait online service doing? OVS configure runs, and now I can't get an IP.
So in general, the network manager wait online service waits for the interfaces to come available. So with systemd and the way that the dependency model works, you declare a dependency on a particular service being up and running, and then it moves on to the next set of services. So it's basically saying, I'm going to wait until network manager says everything is up and running, right? The node has an IP, all of that other stuff. And then the next set of services can do their thing. Apologies for any network manager or systemd people who are far smarter than me on both of those technologies that I just butchered a very basic explanation. So why that would be causing OVS or why OVS would cause that issue, I don't know off the top of my head. That sounds like something has gone wrong in the deployment of the node or something like that, and you may need to redeploy it. I will say that I do occasionally see nodes that I'll log in, I'll SSH in, and it'll say that service has failed, but it's functioning normally. So I don't know what that means necessarily. I don't know. Any thoughts there, Johnny?
No, it's pretty much same. And without any logs to really see what's going on, it's hard to tell like what it's waiting on and why it's failing. So,
yeah. Things are going very wrong for this cluster. Yeah, if OVS isn't able to come up, then the SDN won't come up, which means that none of the rest of the stuff will be able to configure. So, telemeter, Anatoly, I don't know. But just based off of that little bit of information, it doesn't ring a bell. If you can send an email to Johnny or I, JONNY at Red Hat, or Andrew.Sullivan at Red Hat, we can try and take a look, as much information as you have there. Where would you go to look for logs? I would check the system logs. So if you can SSH into the node, so if it has a node IP but not a SDN IP, I would SSH in there. I would check for system logs around network manager configuration. I would also check for any pods or containers related to the SDN. So if you do like a sudo crictl, CRICTL, or cryctl or crycontrol, or I don't know, that'll list all of the containers that are running inside of there, and then you can look for the ones related to OVN and do like a cryctl logs, just like Podman.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So back over here to our, where'd my thing go? So Grafana and Prometheus UIs are gone. Again, check out episode 63 if you want to look for how to deploy Grafana and how to connect it to the endpoints inside of OpenShift so that you can create your own dashboards or use community dashboards, as the case may be. Kind of scrolling down through here, there's another couple a few other big ones that are inside of here. So you'll notice that support for vSphere 6.7 update 2 and earlier has been removed. This is a result of CSI, and we'll talk more about CSI in a minute as well. So effectively, the VMware CSI driver requires virtual hardware version 15. Virtual hardware version 15 is not available until 6.7 update 3. So that's why it has been removed. Right? We're on the road to removing the in-tree or stopping the in-tree VMware provisioner from being present. It's being removed from upstream Kubernetes, not just from OpenShift. So update 1, vSphere 7.0 update 1 or earlier. I think, again, so don't hold me personally responsible. I think that this is a result of VMware's support policy. You'll notice that's just deprecated and not removed. So if we do vSphere support, this is not what I was expecting to see. VMware support by product matrix. Nope, that's a PDF. Come on. Compatibility guide. Anyways, vSphere. It helps if I spell things correctly too. anyways, VMware is declaring 6.7 and earlier. I think support ends in October of this year, is what they're saying. So everybody has to go to at least 7.0. I don't remember specifically why now and why we're deprecating update 1 or earlier. I don't know if that's lumped in with the VMware support policy or something like that, but just be aware that if you're not on at least vSphere 7.0 update 2, it is considered deprecated right now. And then related to that 6.7 update 2 earlier, here's virtual hardware version 13 support is removed. So keep that in mind. I'm trying to think, I don't think there was anything else in here that stood out to me. Automatic generation of service account token secrets, you can see, was removed. Jenkins images from the install payload was removed. I think Jenkins has been deprecated for a while, hasn't it, Johnny?
I want to say yes, but it always seems to find its way back. Like Jenkins is going to be around. I feel like that's going to be like the Red Hat CI tool forever.
Yeah.
Well, not forever, but for a long time.
Yeah. This one, I don't know why this isn't up above, but here, Red Hat virtualization as a host platform for OpenShift container platform will be deprecated. So Red Hat virtualization is moving into, so currently it is fully supported for the next week. So the end of this month, it goes into the maintenance support phase of its life cycle. So 2 years from now, so 2024, it goes into the whatever the next phase of the life cycle is. Rev life cycle. I feel like my internet is slow today. Maintenance support ends, so end of life phase. Maintenance. So it's currently in full support, goes to maintenance. Yeah. So full support ends August 31st, so next week. Then it goes into the maintenance phase. Maintenance support ends in 2 years. And then it is in basically end of life or extended life phase. So you can see extended life phase out here is basically you have access to the bits if it's a known issue or something like that. Support will help, but there's no new patches, no bug fixes, no security fixes, right? None of that other stuff inside of there. So this is that deprecation of Rev as a platform for OpenShift is a result of Rev slowly going away.
I just wanted to back up on one thing really quick. The automatic generation of service account secrets. Just keep in mind if you're doing anything where you're maybe like parsing out the secret or that token from a service account that you're expecting. So if you're spinning up a new cluster and you're starting a service and you're expecting like the that service account that you create to get that token automatically, you're going to have to generate that now. So just keep that in mind. So there's tools like Vault and stuff like that where you can have that externally create that for you and then loop it in through like an external secret or something like that. But just if you do any type of automation where you're doing that, like this is specific to me because we have a tool where we're actually running something like this, and it will break some of the things like once we get there. So I wanted to kind of just emphasize that.
Thank you for additional details there, because I actually didn't notice that one was added to removed before we started here, so I didn't do any research into it. So
yeah, man, it's kind of subtle, but at the same time, I think generally you're going to be fine. But if you're doing something, then it'll mess. Like if you're doing any type of automation, it'll break because it won't be there.
Yeah. All right. So enough of this page. Anyway, thoughts organize. Be sure to review this page. Again, look through those removed deprecated features, anything that might affect you or your applications. Definitely worth looking into. Here's some details about removing support for ESXi/vSphere, stuff like that. It's funny that they have both vSphere 6.7 update 2 and ESXi 6.7 update 2. I wonder why they did that. So yeah. All right. Moving on a little bit. So we already talked about it last week. We had a whole stream about it, Nutanix IPI. So if anybody happened to miss that, go back and check out episode 78. But yeah, Nutanix IPI, if you're running AHV as your underlying hypervisor on the Nutanix AOS platform, you can deploy OpenShift using the fully integrated installer provisioned infrastructure method. We talked about a bunch of different things in that stream. I think they're still working on the CSI provisioning as a part of the installer, but everything else works exactly as you would expect. One thing I didn't do, so heterogeneous. I'm terrible at English. My apologies. Are in tech preview. So normally when we talk about or when we do these streams, I only talk about, we only want to talk about GA features, things that most folks, are comfortable using today. This one I think is really cool, and I think it's something that a lot of folks are going to be interested in. So I definitely encourage you to test it out, to try it out, keeping in mind it is tech preview. So the goal here is you can mix CPU architectures inside of the same cluster. To me, where this is really cool is with things like, AWS, Azure, Google clusters, where I can use less expensive instances for things like the control plane. So I can deploy an ARM-based instance for the control plane, maybe for infrastructure nodes, and then use x86 specifically for my applications that require x86. And then I can reduce my cost inside of each one of those clouds. You can also do things like I was chatting with some Red Hat folks this morning that were excited about, I can deploy, ARM based or something like that control planes inside of a cloud, and then have x86 based worker nodes using remote worker nodes at edge sites and stuff like that. Again, reducing that cost, and in that instance, being able to keep the control plane maybe closer. My edge nodes are in APAC, so I'll use an AWS location that's in that region, as opposed to keeping it in my data center in Texas or wherever. I chose Texas because you're there, Johnny.
Greatest country in the world.
Yeah. I have nothing to add to that.
Hey, so another thing too is there's a blog, and I'm actually gonna, Stephanie, if you're listening and you don't mind if you post it, but it's essentially it's taking some work that Daniel Messer and who we had on before for some of the Quay stuff, or Key, however you want to pronounce it. But had it's Daniel Messer and oh man, I can't remember the other person right now. Oh, Ben Schmoss.
Ben, yeah.
And so, yeah, they put together some stuff with OC Mirror, which went GA in 4.11. So OC Mirror, if you're not familiar with it, is a tool that you can use to simplify your content collection. So you think about like the 4.11 release or 4.10 release, some operators, if you've ever gone through that process to try and pull the operators outside of, the OC mirroring process, it can be a little cumbersome. And I'm saying that very tongue in cheek because it's pretty cumbersome. It's a pain, but this tool, it helps a ton with that. And then, you combine that with the mirror registry capability that, Dan's team put out earlier this year, I think. Now you've got like a whole suite of tools available to you they're all GA, they're all supported, and it'll just help your workflow as far as getting content into your cluster or getting content collected, and then also getting it put into your cluster once you get it onto the your air gap or disconnected side.
I honestly thought that was already GA.
Yeah, so OC Mirror's been tech preview for a while, but it went GA on 4.11, and they just updated their API too, so it's a lot easier to use. Like it's good.
Very cool. Yeah, and don't forget mirror registry, right? So being able to have it deploy an instance of Quay on a Rail node so that you can deploy, pull all of those images over into a fully supported registry instance.
Yeah.
So I just realized that I should probably go faster here because we've got like 15 things still to cover. So I'll stop running my mouth so much here. External DNS operator has gone GA. So let's see here. I want to. Do I already have it up? Probably not. So external DNS. So this was another one that we talked about, I think, in episode 63 as well, right, Johnny? So external DNS operator allows you to, episode 63 was Grafana and external DNS. So this allows you to reach out and configure external DNS for the services and routes inside of your cluster. So I think Tech Preview was with AWS, Azure, and GCP. GA also adds in info blocks, which is pretty cool. So for anybody who's got info blocks on-prem, you can use that to do configuration. I don't know. I should probably ask and find out. It's a downstream of the external DNS operator that's publicly available that supports all kinds of stuff. We talked about that in the other stream. So I wonder if it's possible to do like an RFC compliant DNS server on-prem, like Bind. And, sure, it's not supported, but I don't know. Anyways, project-based default subdomain for routes. So this was a slide that piqued my interest. So here, I'm still in the docs. Where am I in the docs? Oh, I'm in the release notes. So inside of here, we have this. Where did it go? Really? I've completely lost. Here we go. Basically, what this does is if you have route shards, so I deploy with my standard apps star.apps.clustername.domain name domain name. Yeah, we'll go with that. But then I want to create multiple shards. Maybe I have a shard for project 1 and a shard for project 2, where they have a subdomain of project 1 dot cluster name dot domain name, so on and so forth. So the change here is that in the route we can now use this spec.subdomain to have it generate the correct domain name for the route. So previously, when you would go in, and I thought I had this up, and now I can't keep track of all my tabs. When you would create a route that used a subdomain, you'd have to specify the spec.host, and it's spec.host equals route name dot subdomain dot domain or cluster name dot domain name blah blah blah. Now I can just specify spec.subdomain, and it assembles the full domain name based off of that. So it'll pull in the route name, it'll pull in that subdomain value, it'll pull in the cluster name, the domain name, all of that other stuff to make it easier. And I thought that it was inside of here. Let's see if I can find this. So if I do YAML view and check over here in our spec, so we now have this subdomain value here. So I can, in this spec.subdomain, I could do whatever my subdomain is for this particular project. I don't have one set up here, but that's all I would need to do, as opposed to having to do the subdomain is, we'll say, and Sullivan for this one. Whereas before I'd have to do host, and I'd want to do like, okay, this is my hello dot and Sullivan dot whatever my cluster name is, AOA dot domain dot TLD blah 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 blah, which you can see in mine is like this super long thing. So we get away from all that. It's much easier now. What else have I got here? Clustered DNS operator can use DNS over TLS for forwarding. I thought that was a cool one. Again, thought I had this up somewhere. Here we go. Using DNS forwarding. So if we look in the docs here, I'm under networking and understanding the DNS operator. And then we have a using DNS forwarding section here. And if I scroll down, we have this upstream resolvers segment, and I can set the transport to TLS and then provide the CA bundle. So if you want to do, encrypted DNS queries over TLS, you can use that with the cluster level DNS resolver now. I'm not paying attention to chat, Johnny, because I've got the notes document that we were using to keep track of everything here. So please interrupt me. Yeah, please interrupt me. This I thought was an interesting one that wasn't brought up anywhere else. Where are my release notes? So if we go to the release notes and we go, where is it? Notable technical changes. So historically, when we create a route or when we use a route, the HA proxy ingress controller is what controls access to the pods behind there, right? So we assign a service. The service is what defines the pods, the endpoints that it's going to point to. And historically, it has used a load balancing algorithm of least number of connections. So it will choose, if there's 3 or 5 or 10, however many pods backing that route, it will choose the one that has the least number of connections. Now you can see it has switched over to random. So just be aware of that. It may cause some different behavior, or you may need to scale those pods differently, depending on how that works, because it's no longer aware of any of those connections inside of there. I don't know if that will make scalability better or worse, but it's different. So just be aware of that. Looking at chat. Randomness is my wife's favorite word, by the way, or hope none. I don't know. I don't know why that's her favorite word, but that is her favorite word. Let's see. Key Quay, yes. For any Red Hatters, there was a lengthy internal email chain about which English to use to pronounce. I'm gonna say Kiwi or Kwai, or I don't know. How do I most brutally mispronounce it? Anyways.
Well, whichever way you say is right, I'm gonna absolutely tell you it's wrong, just on principle. We're not gonna fight just to tell you that you're wrong.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you.
Anytime.
Let's see some CoreOS related things. So CoreOS has been rebased to RHEL 8.6. So if you had any, driver dependencies, anything like that you needed 8.6 for, please be aware of that. Somebody asked about, I think this was on Reddit. Somebody asked about FIPS for 4.11 or 4.10, 4.11 on power. So CoreOS is a flavor, if you will. It's RHEL, just with specific packages, right? Most particularly RPM OS tree. So FIPS compliance for OpenShift depends on CoreOS, depends on RHEL. So when RHEL has that achieves that certification, then basically the OpenShift folks, OpenShift engineering will go through and validate it, and then it'll be available. But that's the dependency there for anybody who might be waiting. A fairly interesting one for me, or to me anyways, is that the way that machine config operator does updates has changed. So historically, it kind of just randomly selected nodes, right? So in the case of my cluster here, let's see, I've got, this is an Azure cluster. So I've got 3 machine sets here, right? One in each one of my AZs. So Central US 1, Central US 2, Central US 3. So it would go through and it would basically randomly select one of these as the first one to do, and then it would, randomly select any nodes that are inside of here as in order to do them. Now it does them in order. So each machine set is done alphabetically, and then the nodes are updated in order of age. So the oldest node will go first, and then so on and so forth until all of the nodes in the first alphabetical machine set are done. Then I'll move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting change. And that's in the documentation right here.
Nice.
Yeah, so updates affected nodes alphabetically by zone based on topology. And if it has more than one node, the oldest nodes are updated first. So, and it still does it here by max unavailable and all the other normal stuff. Worker latency profiles. So this one, I had to think about this one for a minute, right? Because it's at surface value, when you think about the name and even just looking at like this headline, improving cluster stability using worker latency profiles, you think, oh, this is going to be something like, in vSphere deployments, we usually recommend folks set latency sensitivity at the hypervisor to high, so that way it has more access to resources and stuff like that. So when I first learned about this, I was thinking, oh, okay, it's going to be a way, something that we can use through like TuneD or the performance add-on operator or something like that to basically tune for latency for the workload. That's not it at all. So it turns out what this actually does, and there is a blog post. Johnny, I don't know if you or
I'll
Steve,
dig it up.
yeah, it's on cloud.redhat.com/blog. But effectively, it determines how long, or let me rephrase that. If we start at the top here, um, the documentation explains that the control plane will heartbeat each one of the worker nodes every 10 seconds by default, right? So we have this node status update frequency. If it doesn't respond within the node monitor grace period of 40 seconds, it stops scheduling workload to that node. After 300 seconds, it declares the node as unreachable and will begin rescheduling workload that was originally on that node. So that's the default behavior. And what this does is it allows us to tune those values based on the reliability of the network connection that we have. So, for example, if I go with medium worker latency profile, you can see that it now checks only every 20 seconds. And it will wait until there are 2 minutes, so basically six failed heartbeats, before it declares the node as unreachable. But it has, that's got to be a typo, 60 seconds for it to then declare it as not ready and begin rescheduling workload. That's an interesting one. So I wonder why that is. Pod eviction period is reduced to 60 seconds. Okay. So basically we're adjusting for how much disconnect, how flaky the network in between the control plane and the worker node happens to be inside of there. Oh, I see what it is. So after 2 minutes, it will then wait an additional 60 seconds before rescheduling workload. So it takes longer to declare that the node is unreachable, but it will more quickly begin to reschedule workload. Down here, it takes longer to declare it unreachable, even longer, but then again, lesser time. So if we look up here, it would be the sum of 40 seconds plus 300 seconds before it does those reschedules. Here it would be 2 minutes plus 60 seconds. And then here it would be 5 minutes plus 60 seconds. So this is particularly useful, again, remote worker node type scenarios, other places where you might have a less than reliable network inside of here. I will say that be cognizant of how this might affect, any pod HA, workload HA type of activities, because it could mean that it takes longer for them to get rescheduled. It could mean that they, all of that other type of stuff. So just be aware of that. And I think they talk about that in the blog post, if I'm remembering correctly. Dark mode is available and it's gorgeous. Yep. Kawaii, like the Japanese words, or the Hawaiian island.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's see, where did my notes document go? Moving on here. Grafana's gone. Prometheus UI is gone. CSI. So let's see, if we go to storage and I go to using CSI, so one thing for a long time, like 4 or 5 releases now, CSI volume expansion has been tech preview. And I'm trying to find where in the documentation it's at, but yeah, here we go. So it's been tech preview. It is now GA with 4.11. So I think a lot of people have been using this without realizing that it was tech preview, but it's now GA. So fully supported to do volume resizes for all of the CSI provisioners that ship with OpenShift. I will caveat that by saying, I think that CSI resizing has been, support would fall in line with your CSI provisioner if it comes from a third party. So, if you're using NetApp, Dell, HPE, Fujitsu, Hitachi, etc., if you're using their CSI driver and it's supported, excuse me while I cough a moment. And it supported CSI resizing. That was completely separate. I think this is CSI resizing specific to the Red Hat shipped CSI drivers. I could be wrong there, but I think. So I did want to take a moment to talk a little bit about CSI. So just a reminder, and we've been talking about this for a while as well, I think since the 4.8 days when the Red Hat shipped vSphere CSI driver was first tech preview of eventually all of the in-tree storage provisioners are being removed. So everything will be CSI. All storage providers, all storage drivers will be CSI. So we're starting to see that take effect, right? CSI for vSphere and with a bunch of these others. You can see the list here on my window now. They're all GA. You can do all kinds of other stuff inside of there. CSI adds support for things like snapshots, cloning, resize, etc. as well. So just if you're using an in-tree provisioner today, be prepared for that. So I think that do I have it here? GCP, OpenStack, VMware. So I think that, or let me rephrase this. At some point, for example, with vSphere, if you've been using the upstream, the VMware shipped VMware CSI driver, essentially today you would continue. You have the option of continuing to use that, or you can use the Red Hat one. And I think it is, yeah. So here's the documentation for how to remove that driver. And then basically when the Red Hat one gets deployed, it takes over management of all of those volumes. So there's no real risk to the workload or to the storage because they're effectively the same, right? It's just taking over the management piece inside of there. And I don't think any of these are a part of the data path. Like CSI drivers themselves are around the management of volumes. That doesn't mean that some storage vendors don't have or don't install a package or a driver or something like that to connect to their storage. I'll pick on ODF, right? ODF uses Ceph RBD for block-based volumes. So the CSI provisioner just does volume creation, volume deletion. And then there is a CSI agent on each one of the nodes that will actually mount the volume and do other actions. So that agent on each one of the nodes is what will actually install and manage like the RBD driver package on the host. If it's a file system mode PV or PVC, it's what will format a file system on that volume, that type of stuff. So just be aware that CSI it's here, and it's not only just not going anywhere, it's going to be expanding and be incorporated in more and more. Where did I go on my list here? Let's see, single node OpenShift. Johnny, do you know? I meant to mark this in our notes here. Adding worker nodes to single node OpenShift, is that tech preview or is that GA?
I don't think it's GA. I think it's if anything, it's tech preview.
Okay. So yeah, if you're deploying single node OpenShift, which single node OpenShift itself is fully GA, today it is exactly that. It is a single node of OpenShift. In the future, or I guess today using tech preview, but in the future when it's fully supported, you'll be able to add worker nodes to that. So it's still a single control plane node that is also a shared worker node, probably. But you can add additional worker nodes onto that that one control plane node. Note that there is no way to convert from a single control plane node to 3 control plane nodes. So you can't, start off, I just need a super small deployment, single node OpenShift, and then, oh no, my application has grown to be a monster and it's production, and now I need a fully HA control plane with 3 nodes and all that. You can't convert that cluster. You'd have to deploy a new one and then move your application over. But I wanted to show, where did I do this at? Anyways, if you OpenShift install create single, I need to go into this directory. Oh, actually, I think I broke my stage here. I was going to show there's a command OpenShift install create single node ignition config. We'll just do a -- help here. And basically it works just like a regular OpenShift install create ignition config command. It'll output 2 things though. So one will be the bootstrap in place for that first single node instance. So it'll create that bootstrap in place ignition file, which you could then use the CoreOS installer command to add that uh, 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 ignition file to the ISO. And then you can take that ISO and then go and boot your node to it and get everything up and running. Or you can use assisted installer. But it will also generate a worker ignition file. So you can then use that worker ignition file to boot any additional nodes and have them look to our single node OpenShift instance for machine config and go and do its thing. I don't think that will work with existing clusters because I don't think machine config, right, the machine config server is deployed or used in existing single node OpenShift or pre 4.11 single node OpenShift. So I don't think that you can add those before then or even retrieve the worker.ignition. Tool guidelines to find out which latency profile you should set. Is there a tool? No. I think the guidelines are really around those, wherever my thing went here. It's really around those latency numbers. So if you're expecting there to regularly be periods of time where the node cannot be reached for 2 minutes, then you would want to consider setting maybe that worker latency profile or 5 minutes, however the case may be. And you can see setting it is done on a per node basis. You set it in the node object worker latency profile. I think that'll still work if you're using machine sets as well. I think you can, in the machine set config spec, you can set this value inside of there, so that way it's automatically applied with IPI and machine set provision nodes. I think I haven't tested to verify. So it's not really a tool to test. It's rather a am I expecting, or do I think that my network has these characteristics, and should I then protect my workload? Because that's usually, if we look at remote worker nodes. If we look at remote worker nodes, like if you look at the documentation here, you don't do anything to configure those nodes, right? You see there's nothing that you do here. It's all about awareness of what happens when those remote worker nodes lose connectivity. Because basically what will happen is it can't heartbeat. So therefore, new workload stops being scheduled after 5 minutes. The node that thinks it's disconnected will start shutting down those pods. Because it's assuming at that point that the control plane is surviving and the control plane is now rescheduling that workload. So it starts shutting it down. So the documentation here is really about down here where you did see a little bit of YAML, is how do I allow my pods to continue to run even if my remote worker node becomes disconnected? You see, you set a whole bunch of tolerations so that way it doesn't get booted by kubelet. So that's where, in my opinion, my perspective, this is really helpful. Remote worker nodes is the main use case for those latency profiles. Will OpenShift deploy the vSphere CSI driver automatically on a UPI cluster? Yes. So UPI is an integrated cluster. CSI works. Why is my machine API? That's what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Machine API works. All of those other stuff. The only difference is what or how those nodes were created. With UPI, they were created by a human, or some automation that somebody other than Red Hat created. Whereas with IPI, the installer goes out and creates all of those. But the end result should be a cluster that is 99% the same between UPI and IPI. The biggest difference will be with IPI, the worker nodes are created by a machine set. So you will start off, as soon as the installer is done, you'll see that there's at least one machine set there that you can use to scale. With UPI, and in the case of vSphere, assuming the credentials and permissions are correct, with UPI, all of that should be there so that you can go in and create your own machine set day 2, and it'll work exactly the same. That is a common misconception, is that you can't use machine sets to do node provisioning if you don't do an IPI install. And that's not true. You just have to configure them day 2.
Was that always the case, or was that something that they added kind of after? Okay, because I remember that coming up quite a bit early on. All right,
Yep.
right on.
And the inverse is true as well. So you can manually create a node and then join it to an IPI cluster as well, and have it not be managed by machine API. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. So one is, and I showed this a long time ago. I want to say like before episode 20 of like vSphere IPI. I have my cluster. I go and create a new virtual machine, and I go through the normal UPI add a worker process, and it just joins the cluster. But there's no, node object associated with it. So if we look over
Hmm.
here in my, or excuse me, no machine object associated with it. If we look inside of my cluster here, um, so you can also hit the create machine button here, and if you fill this thing out correctly, it'll trigger machine API to go and provision a node that way. So you can kind of do it one of two ways.
Yeah, I knew the inverse. We've had some customers where like we've deployed IPI and then we're trying to add some workers in, through like the UPI method. But, like that's always worked. I I just feel like early on, maybe there's just misinformation going on around about like, oh, if you didn't deploy with the machine API, you can never add them in. So that's nice to know.
Yeah. So 2 minutes away from my target stop time, and we've got like 3 small things to talk about. So I'm feel like I've done good here on timing.
Yeah, we've been moving. It's good.
Let's see, web terminal operator. So there's a bunch of improvements that were made there. I don't think I installed it to this cluster. No, I didn't. So web terminal operator is really cool. I've used it before on the stream. Basically, here, web terminal. So you can deploy this guy inside of your cluster, and you'll have a little button here up top. Did I have it in? Where'd that other cluster go? No, it's not in this one either. So you'll have a little button up at the top that will deploy a terminal, and a terminal pod, and it'll have a little window that you can pop up here, and you can do your OC and other commands inside of there. So it's a convenient way to interact with your cluster if you're like me and sometimes forget where things are in the GUI. Let's see, project resource quota reporting. If I go to my projects here, so we can see down here resource quotas. This wasn't reported through the GUI before. Now it is. I just don't have any quotas present. So that's a neat one for administrators, for users, because it also applies with. I think I have a user, a non-admin user configured in here. Yeah. So let's see. Project. I went to really. There we go. Now I have the same view here as just a regular user, right? I'm not an administrator anymore. I don't have access to all the normal stuff. So convenient way. Right before, it was a pain to get that information. You either had to go to the CLI or dig around in a bunch of places in the GUI.
Yeah, that's gonna be a nice feature.
Let's see.
And oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and Dave, exactly. It is just like a cloud shell. So Azure Shell and AWS to get into the nodes. Yeah, it's gonna be really nice.
Yeah, one answer, or one question I don't know the answer to, is whether or not you can assign any persistence with that. So like Azure Cloud Shell, right? It provisions a volume that gets attached to your Cloud Shell instance, so that way you can, drop your PowerShell scripts or whatever in there, and they'll persist across sessions. I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. I have no idea. I haven't tried whether or not that exists with the web terminal. Let's see. So I was going to talk about the fail forward operator installs. I think I'm going to skip that for now, because not because of time, but because there's some more details that I want to get about that. I learned just before the stream that it is, I think, a specific use case or a specific scenario where it's most appropriate. So I want to get some more details before I share information on that one. But if you're curious about it, feel free to reach out. Again, Andrew.Sullivan at Red Hat, or Practical Andrew on Twitter, Reddit, etc. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out. I'll share what I know. But before we do it here on stream, I want to know a little more. And then the last one that I'll share here is this. So the ODF, or excuse me, the ODF and the OpenShift virtualization team worked together to create this OpenShift virtualization. They're calling it a reference architecture, but there's a size. Somebody asked if we should change the name because it's not really a reference architecture. It's more like a best practices guide or a recommended practices guide. But effectively, what they did here, and Stephanie, if we could post that link, they went through and they documented how to deploy. Where was it? It's somewhere in the summary here, like 100 node cluster that uses ODF as the storage for OpenShift virtualization. Here, 3,000 virtual machines and 21,400 pods. And they document kind of all of the things that they did in here with regard to like host cluster or host config. Here's how the disks were organized, how the network was configured. Here's any network tuning they did for ODF for Ceph. So you can see things like setting sys controls for the network, just all kinds of stuff that they did inside of here. So I thought it was an interesting read. If you're using, to me, I wonder how applicable much of this is if I'm maybe not using OpenShift virtualization and I just want to use ODF and it's a high performance environment. Does this apply? If we look at the OpenShift virtualization piece, are there things that apply here even if I'm not using ODF, right? So if I scroll down here, like, in my templates, do I need to set things for my various virtual machine templates in order to configure them correctly? Excuse me. I know I'm going through this at like lightning speed. What am I looking for here? Yeah. So like this, they are setting somewhere down here, I thought, like IO threads for each one of the virtual machines, and just various other things. So it was an interesting read, something that I learned a couple of things from. So I also like that they did a bunch of different testing to show you like different performance metrics, things you can expect with various scenarios if you are interested in using OpenShift virtualization and how that affects things. I think that's all I got. Just a reminder, next week we'll be talking about VMware. So I'll be at VMware Explore, and we'll just be all the things VMware related next week. So if you've got any hard questions, any interesting stuff to talk about, be sure to you can submit questions beforehand. I think as soon as we get the stream staged on YouTube, you can start chatting, which is weird. So we try to check the YouTube channels to see if there's any chat that has happened before it starts, see if there's any questions. So, but social media and email are going to be the best way. All right. Yeah, that's all I got.
Nice. Yeah, that reference architecture, that's awesome. I'm glad that they did that because that's, they're both huge products, right? And they're both huge products on OpenShift that people are really interested in. So I'm glad that they put something together like that because it kind of simplifies it, or at least it gives context to things that might be abstract when you're looking at the documentation. So it's nice.
Yeah.
And then Dave Core 82 said that every time you were saying OpenShift virtualization, he was hearing OpenShift fertilization, and it's just cracking me up.
I speak one language, bad English, so
Yes, me too. I speak Texan, which is like sub English. So
yeah. Speaking of Johnny's shirts, I won't state anything obvious, but I will encourage folks to go to the Cool Stuff store and check out the OpenShift collection. They added some new products there that are pretty cool. So I say cool, knowing that I'm not cool. I haven't been cool in a long time, but I think they're neat products.
I think you're cool.
Thanks.
That's all that counts.
That is all that counts. All right, y'all. Thank you to our audience. We really appreciate you coming out today, spending time with us, learning about OpenShift. If you have any questions, if you're not watching us live, feel free to send those over, right? Social media, email, all that other stuff. Andrew.Sullivan at Red Hat, Johnny, J-O-N-N-Y at Red Hat. We'll do our best to respond back to you as quickly as we can. A reminder to subscribe to the channel just so that you're aware of any of the topics that we have coming up. As we said at the beginning here, we've got like the next 2+ months of content all planned out. And it's a lot of really cool stuff. The summer has been a little bit of a doldrums. I feel like we've been, sometimes a little last minute. Stephanie's laughing at me right now. I'm sure I can't laughing at me because sometimes we've had some things a little last minute, but not for the next, basically through the end of the year. So Yeah, thank you all for coming out. Love the chat. Chat is why we're here, and questions are why we're here. So really appreciate it. Stephanie, thank you for your help and support in the background. Johnny, as always, really appreciate you you joining me here today. So I'll leave last words for you.
Yeah, always, man. Thank you, and yeah, thanks for walking through and doing the lion's share of all the demos and click throughs today. Thanks for all the info. Make sure you like and subscribe on Twitch or YouTube or whatever you're using. And Stephanie, thank you for everything. Because without you, we would we'd be exposed as unprofessional, which is most terrible. So no, but thank you, and we'll see you guys next week.